Welcome, everybody, to the Grand Weaver. We are so excited to be here with you today. We have a special guest with us, Justin Unger. I didn't even ask him how to pronounce his last name. So, Justin, you're going to have to help make sure we got
Nailed
that right.
it.
Yeah?
Nailed it.
Boom.
Been doing this my whole life. No. But Justin, yeah, it's a gift to have you here with us, man. We are excited to hear about Likewise Worship and what God has been up to in your life, in your ministry, in your team. I had a chance to kind of look around. You got a great squad of people around you. And before we jump into that, let me make sure we get a chance to have an intro from our co-host, my partner in this pathway, Eric Henry.
Yeah. I got nothing profound to say today other than I'm excited to hear from Justin and his story, because certainly worship leading is near and dear to my heart. And so, you know, the stirring for me, I got introduced, it's kind of in the weaving of things. I got introduced to Justin through Terry. Terry was an introduction to me by Dave St. John at KTIS and Northwestern Media. And so all the paths are weaving together. And Dave said, hey, you got to meet this Terry guy, because he's ministering to worship leaders in the Twin Cities. And we know over the last several years has been kind of crazy. And so just trying to keep people engaged and serving. And so I'm super excited to hear about kind of Justin, your heart, and how this whole thing got started. So that's kind of how I fit into this thing, is like, hey, I'm one of the worship leader guys that goes to the Likewise events. I'm happening to get to go to one tonight. So I'm looking forward to that. But with that, Ron, take it away, man.
Yeah, Justin, we want to know about you, my friend, and what God has been up to in your life and in your ministry, this service to worship leaders to help fuel them for the future and maintain their ministry and service to congregations and people all over the world, actually through the ministry of music. But talk to us about who you are first. Where are you at in the world? How has God called and placed you to be in that place with your people? And then we'll talk a little bit about your ministry after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually in the world. I'm out in San Clemente, California right now. We've lived in this area just for a few months. It's a temporary housing situation right now. We're kind of in between location, but we're loving it. The nice cold weather. I think it's 70 degrees out. So we're loving it. I mean, no offense. I know you guys are out there in Minneapolis. The good news is it'll be like this all winter long. So we'll see what happens. So come out at any time. But yeah, so I guess I'll just take you back really quick, just a little bit of my story. When I was 19, I had been a songwriter as a high school student. And I was, as a teenager, writing songs with my grandfather, who was a poet. And my grandfather discipled me as a kid, and he was the pastor of our church. So I've always been involved in the church, came to faith in Jesus as a young kid, but then started singing songs for the people of God to bring them together. And when I turned 19, I found myself in Nashville, Tennessee. I had won a Christian music competition, which was very unexpected for me, because I thought I was going to be a meteorologist. In my life.
Those are close.
I was like, I love the weather. I love thunderstorms. I just was fascinated, and I still am. Would love to chase a tornado someday. But anyway, but the Lord changed my path and my course, and signed a record deal when I was 19 with Warner Brothers out there in Nashville, Tennessee. So I moved from Phoenix, Arizona to Nashville. And I was because I was young, they placed me in a Christian pop rock, like, boy band. And yeah, I know.
You liked it or no? Yeah.
Well, I had beautiful blonde hair at the time. So they were like, oh yeah, this will sell some CDs.
Did you have frosted tips or no?
Oh yeah. Are you kidding me? Yeah. And so, our target audience was 13-year-old girls and their moms. So it was one of those funny things that the record label manufactured this band. They said, we want you to be in it. And they sent us around North and South America for 5 years. We had some pretty good success with some Warner Brothers TV shows and some radio hits and all that. But we did only make about $14 off the whole thing. So after 5 years, it didn't really work out that well. But being in that industry was kind of a wake up call to me in my life. I had always thought that, ministry was something special, wanted to serve the Lord, and loved writing songs and music. But experiencing what my wife and I experienced on the road was pretty hard for us, and we kind of burned out in the Christian music industry. We had seen a lot of artists become addicts. We had watched marriages fall apart, even just on tour with spouses away for so long from each other. And when my wife and I found out we were going to have our first baby, I just felt the Lord saying, "Hey, I have a different plan for your life and ministry," and it was kind of hard because I had just thought, man, this would be such a cool way to have this career as a recording artist, but the Lord opened a door for us to get out of our contract with Warner Brothers, and literally when that door shut, another door opened for me to become a worship pastor in Northern Arizona. And at the time, I think I was 25 years old, and stepped on staff at this church as a pastor. I had never led worship in my life. I had only performed. So I was there's a big difference between the performer and the worship leader. A lot of churches are struggling with that right now because that performance-driven culture in the church. But it was just a matter of time where I fell deeply in love with the local church and was just fascinated by the supernatural power of singing together. So when people sing together, it's like it creates this supernatural glue that God designed to bind his people together. And so I just fell in love with leading people in worship and empowering them to sing together, and then stepping out of the way so that they can encourage and admonish one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. And so I became a worship pastor, and that's really the beginning of our story with Likewise Worship. And there's a little bit more to it, but I wanted to see if you had any questions just about my story before I tell you about the ministry.
Oh, that's good, Justin. A couple of playful questions come to mind in terms of your favorite places that you visited with your long locks and frosted tips. But what you enjoy the most while you were on the road in the midst of the challenges that you experienced?
Yeah, I actually really loved being on the road on a tour bus because your show ends at 10 o'clock at night. By the time everything's packed up, it's midnight. You're eating pizza again, and then you just crash on the bus, and then you wake up in another city. And it's just, and sometimes we would lose track of what city we're going to be in, but it was always just so fun. And the joy of sleeping on a tour bus, because you can freeze out your bunk. So I would turn the AC way down, and then I'm freezing myself out in the big comforter, and but the rumble of the engine just lulls you to sleep like a little baby. Anyway, so I think everywhere I've been, I really loved Chicago. There were a few times we would end up in Chicago, and whether it was on the Today Show or one of those, or what is it, the Good Morning America or something. And being able to wake up in a big city like that was really cool for me, especially growing up in Phoenix and feeling like, wow, this side of the country is so different than the desert where we lived. And so, all the travel was really special. But yeah, I would just say just waking up in different cities was just such a cool change of pace from what I grew up in. So
when you found yourself as a worship pastor, what was the most striking thing at first? I know you mentioned something about singing together, but I'm just curious, like that I mean, there's quite a contrast between those two experiences for you. And so what drew you to the church? I mean, I know you mentioned your childhood, but I'm curious about that draw, and then like what stuck out to you in that contrast.
Yeah, it was funny. I went into it feeling a little nervous because I remember my grandfather and a few people telling me, "Hey, don't ever go on staff at a church. I I'm warning you." I'm like, "Oh."
Yeah.
So I remembered later on in my life, I'm going, "Why am I going on staff at a church?" And I now I understand what they were saying back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think the thing that lit me up was just the idea of unity. I think about that prayer that Jesus prayed in John 17, where he prays that they, the people, his people, would be one as Christ and the Father are one.
Yeah.
And I always love thinking about that because before that, in John 17, and this is eternal life, that they may know you, the one true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. I'm thinking, man, his desire for unity, his desire for us to live out and preach the gospel to each other every day. One of the best ways to do that is by singing together. And so I love feeling like I can play a part in answering that prayer that Jesus prayed by providing for the body this opportunity to be unified with one another. And I'm telling you, I had led worship a handful of times at this church right after I went on staff. And then it was probably like 6 months later, I went to this big concert. It was a rock band, pop rock band. We went down to Phoenix, and that's when a light bulb went off. Was I was at this concert, about 90,000 people. Okay, it was a Coldplay concert. I didn't know if you should know who it was, but I love Coldplay. And so I'm at this Coldplay concert, and 90,000 people in the room, and we're in this one moment, everyone's singing one of these songs, and like this light bulb went off, and I'm looking around, and I just felt connected with all these people. I don't know these people, and it wasn't even a worship song, obviously, but it was this supernatural power of music that transcends language. And
Yeah.
so it made me really think about, okay, how is God trying to leverage this gift that he gave the church to really bring unity and to bring us together? And in Colossians it says admonish and encourage one another with
Yeah.
psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. So just the idea of the importance of singing together, to answer your question, I mean, that just blew my mind. Like, God made it for this purpose, to bring people from all different walks of life together to sing together. And it made me really value the worship leading role, which really brings me to why we have this ministries, because we are passionate about equipping worship leaders and keeping them healthy in the church. And I can tell you a little bit more about how we got there. But yeah, so does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I resonate with so much of it because that's similar to my journey in the church. And I've been so impressed as I go through the gospels, the concern and the call for unity. Absolutely the
Yeah.
same. And I don't know that everybody immediately thinks of unity in the context of singing, and even the things about whatever liturgy type tradition you have in church, something about even saying the Lord's Prayer together, or and Ron, actually, as part of our story together, is you teaching on the Lord's Prayer, but something about singing together. And just this past week, I had the privilege of going to Albania and hearing how great is our God in Albanian, but knowing that it's how great is our God. Something about
Yeah.
that connection with the church across the world, singing the songs, proclaiming Jesus, is just unbelievable to me. And so it's beautiful.
That's
I'd say, yeah,
amazing.
I'm just resonating
Yeah.
with you on that part for sure.
Yeah.
So,
And really, it is the one thing, if you think about it, it's one of the main things we actually take with us into eternity, that like
mhm.
we're practicing. It's almost a glimpse of heaven. I mean, we know that we're going to be worshiping, and we can't even really grasp what it will be like, but it's
Yeah,
a small glimpse for the
yeah,
body of Christ to experience what eternity might get to have with it. So anyway, so yeah, it's such an honor to be able to even talk about this because it just fires me up.
Yeah. So a little bit of my story, because I think maybe it'll lead into likewise. So the Raleigh, who was our worship leader, comes to me in November of 2019, and he says, "Hey, I've been praying about it, and the Lord's telling me it's time to retire from leading worship. I've been doing it for 35 years." So he shares with me, and he says, "I'm going to retire March 1st, 2020." So then the church called me to step into the worship leading role March 1st, 2020. Like,
I
yes.
know
And
where
so
this is
I
going.
did all the things. Yeah. So I did all the things. My wife was very concerned because she knows me. It's like, wait a minute, you're going to step into this role. She was on staff prior. And so she knows what that all means. And she's like, you're kind of an obsessive personality. So can you set up some guardrails and do all the things? And so I went to my accountability people and I said, here's my guardrails and my boundaries for church. And here's how I'm going to do my worship leading thing and balance family and all the stuff. And had all my people, and it was all documented. And then I started March 1st, 2020. And a few weeks later, everything in my studio moved to the church building, and we started recording services. And it took a little while as I crumpled up that boundary statement thing that I shared with my wife and tossed it in the corner for a good 6 months or so. And so I definitely know that part of my story. I know a lot of senior pastors and worship leaders and stuff. Just that was a really hard season for the church collectively, partially because we couldn't gather and lift our voices together. I remember a moment, speaking of unity, I just felt prompted after a rehearsal. And this is right during COVID time when we were just being able to even gather in spaces. And I just started singing 10,000 Reasons. And I, by myself in the worship center, I didn't even know anybody else was in the building. And a woman came and she sat down and she just started crying. And she said, I forgot what this was like. Even after a couple months of not being able to gather. And that just landed on me. And so just, like, why is it so important for us to gather and worship? Because we so easily forget what it's like to be unified. And so I'd love for you to kind of share what led to the starting of Likewise and your heart for this ministry.
Yeah. And well, my story is similar to that, where accepting this position, becoming a worship pastor, all the joys of serving God and his kingdom, but then the challenge of not making it about my own kingdom was I think what started I guess a spiral a little bit in my life. I had never been on staff at a church, so I had never really been warned or even prepped on what it would be like, even though I have so many amazing stories of my first church position. Within a few years, or maybe it was 2.5 years, I started experiencing some of that burnout, where I had boundaries, but then they all kind of disappeared because the needs were so high. And as the church was growing substantially, it was growing, I mean, so fast. My job, my role kept changing. And then the senior pastor was noticing different hidden talents that I had that would help build the church more. So I just kept piling all these things on my plate because, and unfortunately, our senior pastor had the mindset of, let's get as much out of our team as possible. Instead of hiring help, let's just try to activate all these different talents. And I didn't have good healthy boundaries. I had a really hard time saying no. It had become part of my identity of I could just be everything for everyone, and I love people and I love serving the Lord, but I also love my wife and my 4 children, young children that I had at the time. We had 4 kids under 5. And all this stuff is piling on with the church. And I started having some stress-related health issues that I didn't know it was stress, but I was going blind in my right eye, and over a few months, we couldn't find a doctor that could diagnose what was going on. Slowly losing my eyesight, excruciating pain in my eye. We finally found a doctor in Phoenix. We drove down from Prescott to Phoenix, and he looked in my eye, and then within a split second, he looked at me and said, he's like, "Are you stressed?" And I was like, "No, I'm not stressed.
Yeah.
I'm an American." And he goes, "Well, what do you do?" And I was like, "Well, I'm a worship pastor." He's like, "Well, is worship pastoring stressful? Are you exhausted?" I was like, "Well, no, I mean, I'm tired. I've got 4 kids." And then I just kept excusing it. And then he looked over at my wife and he said, "Is he stressed?" And then she started crying in the doctor's office. And then it was at that moment I was like, "Uh-oh." And then he looked at me with the most like fatherly sternness and said, he's like, "You are stressed and you need to change your lifestyle." And I'm going, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You have shingles on your optic nerve and it has already spread to your other eye. And within 6 to 12 months, you could be completely blind and you'll never see your kids again." And I was like, I was in shock.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was at that long drive home where my wife and I had just this come to Jesus conversation about the way I was living and working and serving and ministering in the church, and
Right.
excusing stress with mandated ministry. Like, well, it's ministry. I was always justifying it and sacrificing my family. So there came a point where I felt really alone because I didn't really have anyone in my life holding me accountable. I didn't have anyone in my life asking me tough questions about my rhythms of rest or Sabbath, or even, am I taking on too much? I just kept going in the grind of a growing church. And I eventually started wishing somebody would have warned me. And the Lord, through that time, broke me down and started restoring me. But Psalm 23 came alive in a way that nobody, I would have never even imagined, when it says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures.
Yeah.
He leads me beside quiet waters, and he restores my soul." And it was at that time where I felt like I could feel the pressure of my loving, shepherding Father making me lie down, saying, "No, I'm not going to let you continue in this behavior any longer. I'm going to bring you to a place of rest." And it's his rest that I needed, but I didn't know that. And so I invited a mentor into my life at that time to start telling me what I don't want to hear. And he said, "Justin," he said, "your problem is you think you're more important than you really are." And I said, "Oh, thank you."
I've heard that a time or two. Yeah.
He says, "You just need to remember that God's kingdom will continue on just fine without you." And it was like the sky opened up in that moment, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I've this is a pride issue. I've taken upon myself this responsibility to unify God's people when he wants me more as a sheepdog, not a shepherd. He wants me to just be with the flock and caring for them instead of feeling like I have to run the whole thing." And so it was a wake-up call for me. And so that's why my wife and I said, now that our marriage was healthy, God preserved us through that time, but we didn't want to abandon ship like a lot of these worship leaders are doing. They burn out and they leave the church. They go into the marketplace. And I was like, I'm not giving up on serving in the church. I still see so much value in the bride of Christ gathering and the role of the worship pastor. I see it as one of the foremost important roles in the body, especially in a time like this, is being on the front lines. And so we started this ministry called Likewise Worship, and it was basically a ministry that provides what we wish we would have had for worship leaders and their families. And so we're a preventative and restorative ministry, with the ultimate goal of seeing the church unified. So our vision statement is healthy leaders, humble worship, one church. We want the ultimate result to be one unified church, no matter what denomination or context. We want the bride to be one. We want to fulfill that prayer that Jesus prayed. But that can't happen if leadership is prideful and arrogant. So we want to see worship leaders humble, not rock stars, not worship artists. That's not a bad thing. We just want to see them leading humbly, which means that they're not leading in their own strength, building their own kingdoms. And when they're humble, that promotes a healthy environment for them to stay discipled and rested and trusted in their role. And so that's our vision statement. And then our mission is we serve and preserve worship leaders by providing community care and coaching. So we have monthly gatherings now in 8 cities around the United States. And yeah, in Twin Cities there, Terry leads the charge there, which we're just so grateful for him and Krista. But we do monthly gatherings for our community aspect, where we bring worship leaders all together once a month to encourage them in accountability, to guide them in their homes of healthy homes and restful lifestyle, to where they're not overdoing it and they're prioritizing their marriage and their children. And then we do care by dealing with some of the crisis stuff that's going on, whether they're burning out or whether there's secret sin that they can't tell anybody about. They come to Likewise and they tell us what's really going on, and we can walk with them through that and see them restored. And then we have our coaching component as well, that allows them to feel more equipped and trained and developed to lead better with better rhythms in the context of the church, to work better with the senior pastor and to serve their volunteers with more of a pastoral heart. And so we provide those 3 things because we want to see them healthy. Historically, they would push the musicians to the front lines of the battlefield. So before the battle would start, they'd throw all the musicians up there and they would all turn around and look at the army and say, let's sing it. Or there would be a battle cry, or there would be some instrument. Music would unify the army and make them feel bigger than and stronger than they really were. But it would also confuse the enemy and intimidate the enemy, because when you hear this unified battle cry, the enemy is shaking. Because there's not a lot of that going on the other side with the devil and all of his schemes. They're just out to take down these frontline leaders. And so we want to see these worship leaders wearing the full armor of God and ready to extinguish the arrows from the enemy. And so we're up at the front lines with them, keeping them empowered and healthy. And so anyway, we want them to stay in the church longer. And we kind of call it worship pastor insurance. Yeah, when I'm telling group of senior pastors, I was like, hey, do you guys have worship pastor insurance? And they're, well, what's that? Well, that's what we provide. We want your worship leader to stay longer. And we just got these stats from Barna, and it says 1 in 5 ministers have had suicidal thoughts in the past year. 1 in 10 ministers will actually retire as a minister in some form. Only 1 in 10 will even stay in the church until they retire. 90% of pastors feel as if they are inadequately trained to cope with all the ministry demands. 90% of them feel like they haven't been trained to deal with the stuff that comes at them. And then one more, 70% do not have someone that they consider a close friend in ministry. It's a very lonely role 70%. To play in the church. Yep. So, and this is Barna and the Fuller Institute that gave us those stats. And so musicians are weird, quirky people. It takes one to know one. And so we know how to care for these leaders, and this year we'll be serving. By the end of the year, we'll be almost to 2,000 worship leaders just this year that we've cared for and engaged with throughout 2024. So it's an incredible gift to be a part of a ministry like this.
I am just like compelled to think about the ways in which y'all have strategically set yourselves up to meet the needs that you felt yourself. And I'm fascinated even by the nature of this transition from being a rock star on the road to being a rock star in a place, right? What does it look like to develop leaders who stay in a place and serve in such a way that it's sustainable, it keeps them healthy, it keeps them humble, and it helps create unity. I'm holding on to those kind of essentials that I've picked up from you in terms of what y'all are doing to help serve the ministry leaders in these churches. What have you heard from those who've participated, these 2,000 ministers that y'all have even worked with over this past year? What type of life and fuel and kind of reflections are you hearing about them in terms of how you've been a part of blessing their ministry and their church?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak for some of the OG leaders. So we started with 12 worship leaders in Phoenix, Arizona, about 8 years ago. And within 6 months, we were serving over 60 worship leaders from all across Arizona. And some of those folks that have continued to be a part of our retreats and our soul care gatherings. A handful of them would tell you that they wouldn't still be in ministry if it wasn't for Likewise Worship. It's become a really safe place for them. We call it the third place. They have their home, they have their workplace, and then they have their Likewise community where they can go and really offload the burdens that they carry in from the front lines and from church ministry, and get encouraged and equipped to stay with it and not to leave and not to retreat. And so some of that, but then even the first time people, some of the people that have just started coming, they'll say after the first time they've gone to a couple gatherings, they were kind of waiting for the pitch or the what's the catch? Like, why are you being so nice to me? Like, why are you buying me a nice meal and taking my spouse out? Or why are you caring about me? Is there a transactional thing happening here? I think the thing that most of these leaders feel pleasantly surprised by is that we are fully funded by generous churchgoers and worshipers that want to know how they can serve ministry leaders on the front lines, how they can care for them. So for us to be able to use those resources to provide these ministry aspects of Likewise for free with no expectation is really mind-blowing to them. And I'm sure, Eric, you could probably relate. It's hard to be a good receiver sometimes in ministry where you're good at giving out, pouring out. So I think the challenge for some of these leaders is they think there's a catch. And so for them to learn how to receive from the Lord through this ministry has been really refreshing for them. And I mean, a lot of emotions when they talk about how this has changed their lives. We hear about a lot of the marriages that have been restored just because we've helped these leaders communicate what's really going on to their spouses. And then even the wives, like we've had some spouses of worship leaders come to our retreats and say, I've been supporting my husband and in ministry for 12 years, and I've never felt seen like I have with this ministry. Because wives can get lost in the mix of all this. Like my wife even stopped attending church when I was burning out. She started getting bitter towards the senior pastor. So she couldn't even sit under his leadership because she was having a hard time forgiving him. And then she kind of faded away. And I was always like, well, I'm not going to make a big deal about it. It's just a hard time with all these kids. But we usually see before a worship leader will burn out, their spouse has already burned out. And so we do have a part of our ministry where we're chasing after these spouses and allowing them to offload some of that. and to see that they're not alone. And so I think that's ultimately, if there's one thing that we hear the most is, I feel we hear that these leaders feel so encouraged that they're not alone. And there's that Star Wars quote. I don't know if you saw the last Star Wars movie that came out. One of the characters was feeling despair because he felt like nobody was going to come to the rescue. And then the other character said, well, that's exactly what the enemy wants to do. The enemy wins when he makes you think and feel like you're alone. And so we're trying to get these leaders to see that they're not alone. Their spouses have, there's this community of people that want to pour into them and equip them and help them stay and stand firm in the ministry on the front lines.
I resonate so much with that because it's interesting for me as we get this call to start this podcast. As I was in Albania last week, I know for me, I'm thinking, what value am I bringing? Am I going to do something to help in Albania that's beyond the price of the ticket that I flew over there with instead of sending the money? And I was very concerned about these things. And I was struck because the number of people that have responded with feeling seen and valued because they were asked to be on this podcast, which I'm like, nobody even knows what this podcast is. Like, okay, but and I'm in Albania, and this family is looking at me like, thank you so. Like, I feel so alone, and then you came, and I didn't do anything other than see them and walk with them. And it's like, oh wait. Oh, they just needed to know that they weren't alone as they're trying to be faithful and serve on the front lines. And it's interesting how we overcomplicate it so often. Like, I know in my own mind, like, what am I going to do to provide value and contribute and be helpful? And people are just going, you saw me. Like, oh man, that's all I had to do was show up and be present. It reminds me of Ron, you talking about practicing being present. Right?
Yep, so, keep showing up was the message I got in starting this work here at Bethel. Justin, how does that show up for you, right? As the leader of this ministry, I'm wondering what showing up looks like for you, and even how maintenance of your health is now maintained in service to others.
Yeah, it's weird. That's a great question because I feel like I'm always learning the same lesson. I know that sounds a little bit immature, but it's like
or real.
It's like every season I feel like there's a new aspect to pride and to even the battle between two kingdoms, my kingdom and God's kingdom. I feel like every season. Okay, I'll just tell you, like right now, I have 4 teenagers, okay? 19, 17, 16, 13. And my kids are incredible and I'm having so much fun, but I'm seeing that this season of God sanctifying me through my kids now, because it's all, I think part of it's about control, and pride. And a lot of us musicians, our identity is wrapped up in what we do or what people perceive of us. And I even struggle with that as a dad. Like, okay, is my child's actions going to represent me? It's just that challenge of being in ministry and being up at the top of a ministry or on stage in a ministry to where you feel like everyone's staring at you. So you have to build this false kingdom that everyone looks at and goes, oh, wow, he's got everything together. And so it's this constant, the Lord teaching me that I must increase or I must decrease every day. So that the Lord will increase. So every day having to die to my own kingdom, myself, and allow the Lord in his strength and his control. Because it's like a control thing too. Like the Lord's convicting me all the time is, your kids are on loan to you. They belong to me. And so I want you to start letting go of wanting to control the outcome and let him take over. And so it's that same thing that I would just answer that, what God's trying to do and how he is allowing me to stay present. to answer your question, ultimately surrounding myself with people that have gone there before me and that can speak into my life. So I have to pursue what I'm providing.
Yeah, yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
providing care, discipleship, leadership for leaders, but I also have to pursue that in my own life. So I have a handful of guys that speak into my life, and they ask the tough questions, and they hold me to the fire, and then they ask my wife, is he really,
Yeah.
how's he doing in this? It's been a couple of those guys are on my board, and so it's good having that kind of accountability. But what we tell people is you can't wait for that accountability and discipleship to come to you. You have to pursue it, or you'll fall into isolation. And so, anyway, so thank you for asking that, Ron, because it's good for me to even preach that to myself as even in real time. Like, I need to make sure I have those rhythms in my life where I'm allowing people to speak into me, and so it's a gift that God put me through the fire in the way He did in ministry, so that I can continue to see it lived out in the way I lead my staff and the way I lead my family. So
Yeah. And so as we encourage people to seek that out, how do people find Likewise? Because, for me, it was a mutual friend introduction, and I was like, oh, I didn't even imagine that it existed. So I didn't think to look for it. So I'm curious, like how you think about that and approach it, or raise awareness to the services that Likewise provides.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so a lot of these folks that have found Likewise, it's just been through word of mouth or on Instagram. There's a ministry out there that cares for worship leaders. We have different ways that we share our mission. Some of it's through music. We put out worship songs. We have a music group side of our ministry where we're able to write new music and put it out there. A lot of that, we want to empower worship leaders that would never have the opportunity to record some of their music, and we have access through a distribution company in Nashville who has partnered with us to do that. But then a lot of times, like I said, people will get plugged in because they find themselves in a tight place in ministry where they're struggling. They're trying to find their identity again, not in their own gifts and their own things, but in the Lord. And so, yeah, we've had a handful of people come to our retreats just because they Googled worship retreat, and they found their way into our ministry. And then we have this worship leader health check that there's nothing like it in the world. It's a 6-minute assessment that worship leaders take to help them diagnose and identify any areas in their ministry and even in their personal life where they may have blind spots. So it helps identify those things that could become a problem for them. And the algorithm that they have set up is brilliant. My team has worked so hard on this. And it allows a worship leader, like I said, in 6 minutes to go, wow, this pinpointed me exactly where I need to be focusing some attention. And it stems from 3 pillars, whether a worship leader's rested, trusted, and discipled. So those 3 things, if they're deficient in one, then they'll start experiencing symptoms and signs of burnout. And so we want them to stay healthy in all 3 of those. So word has gotten out about the health check. But then we have area directors in those 8 cities that are daily pursuing new worship leaders. So like our San Diego area director, he's our pastor down there. He just has a Rolodex full of church phone numbers, and he goes and Googles what the name of the worship pastor is there. And then he calls them and says, hey, I want to take you to lunch. No strings attached, just want to get to know you and tell you about how we're here to serve you. And so I would probably say that we have the best team in the world. Our staff of very wise and experienced worship pastors who've decided to jump on the faith journey with me and my wife to pour into these leaders. with no transaction to them, but a way for them to feel loved. It's just what we wish we would have had. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then our website, of course, likewiseworship.com.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we be praying for you?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Hey, how much time do you have?
I don't think we're going to run out of tape, so we're okay.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I would say if there was one thing I would just say, pray for us, pray for my whole staff, because we actually, I think since we started this ministry, I feel like everyone on our team has experienced substantial amounts of warfare, spiritual warfare, just whether it's health, whether it's just the attack of the enemy on our minds, or whether it's finances, being in a missionary organization like this, the faith that is required to trust that God's going to provide. The month to month thing it's nerve wracking for the whole family. I would say it's stretching all of us. So pray that our faith would increase. But I just say overall protection for my team, because we feel like if we're serving the leaders on the front lines, it means that we're actually in front of the front lines. And so I feel like the enemy hates what we're doing. I would say everybody on our staff would resonate with that. The enemy very much hates the mission of Likewise Worship, because we are ultimately keeping these leaders healthy and equipped that the enemy has been working on for years and years. And then they find their way into our community. And now all that hard work that the devil put in to discourage and deflate them gets undone. And so he's just relentless after us and our own families and even our kids. And so pray for supernatural protection, and then pray for provision, because as the ministry grows, our expenses are, a lot more than what they've ever been, because God's working. And so our faith is growing, but pray that God would provide supernaturally for especially 2025. It's a big growth year, not as much like a increase expansion type of thing, but we need some support staff to help fill in some of the cracks that we have on the team. And so be praying that God would provide, especially here at the end of the year, substantially, so that we can really launch 2025 with some momentum. And so, yeah, thank you so much for asking, by the way. That's awesome.
Justin, sometimes it's helpful to name some things, my friend, either in relation to goals for your personal life and even for provision. And so I wonder, Eric, we didn't talk about this specifically, about how we transitioned to this moment for you, Justin, but talk to us about what you are assessing as the needs within this organization. And then if you can name it in some ways, I think you can either tame it or claim it, and we can welcome folks in to kind of weaving their lives into yours to help support the ministry at Likewise.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we have two communities of giving. One of them, we use a lot of military terms because we already talked about the spiritual battle and the worship leader's role in it. But we have Forge partners, which are our monthly recurring supporters, which those are probably the most vital part of our ministry survival and health, is because that's that consistent support that comes in that allows us to fulfill all of our programs, which is our monthly gatherings, the one-on-ones that our team does weekly, the crisis counsel and care that we provide. And then like the cohorts and the workshops that we do around the country. We have different workshops that we provide for churches alongside their worship leader that help them equip their teams so that they can lead at a higher level. And so, yeah, monthly support. And then obviously we have a retreat scholarship. So these worship leaders come to the retreat, they pay the registration fees, but then we try to scholarship the rest of that amount because a lot of worship leaders can't afford to do a lot of that stuff. And if they can't afford it, we don't want them to take from their family vacation fund to come on our retreats. So we try to get them sponsored, and we raise, this year our scholarship fund is $87,000, which allows us then, we'll probably serve close to 200 people at our next retreat in September next year. And so we're just kicking off, starting to raise support for the scholarship fund. And then overall operations, everybody's trying to raise their own support at some level in their areas to keep their areas operating. But that's obviously the G&A general. And then so the second community of giving is called Frontline Partners. And those are more of like the airdrop that comes in and drops resources at the front lines. And those are like the larger gifts that we depend on every year that help us finish the year strong, but it helps us with most of our operations, our staffing and support, our admin, the fees, and then some of our storytelling to allow other people to know about the ministry. And then finally, it's our expansion. So our expansion program, which is allowing us to launch a new city. Typically, it costs a little over $100,000 to launch a new city in a calendar year. And so being able to raise that before we launch the city really helps us put our best foot forward. So we're trying to launch Nashville next year, which is a really big launch. We think it may be probably the biggest one because there's a church on every corner. Within 6 counties, there's 1,600 churches in Middle Tennessee. And so we have our area director in place. Literally today, he just started telling people that he's joining our team. And so that's our other one, our expansion fund. So we'd love to launch another new city each year. And so, yeah, those two giving communities allow us to do what we do. And Terry's on my development team as well. So he and I are putting our heads together on how we can keep telling the story of Likewise, and how the churchgoer or the business owner who loves to worship and sees the value in a healthy leader will jump on board with a kingdom impact that's literally changing the world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful. So the question that Ron usually asks, and I'm going to ask it this time because I took the mic, but what would you, sort of in parting, what would you say to worship leaders that that aren't part of Likewise right now?
Yeah, great question. I would say, first off, you don't know what you don't know. I would let them know that they are deeply loved and so incredibly valuable for the unity of the body of Christ, and that their role in the church is so important for the future of the church. No matter what happens in our country or in the world, whether we're driven underground, the giftedness of a worship leader and the calling of a worship leader to gather God's people like a sheepdog does, that surrounds the perimeter of the sheep to keep them connected with one another. It's their role. I would just really urge them to understand the gravity of their calling and the importance, but also how deeply loved that they and their families are. And that there's a community called Likewise Worship out there that is here to help affirm that and to be a foundation in their lives. And so we just want them to know that they're not alone and that they don't have to suffer silently, even when things get hard, and that there's a whole community of people that want to love on them without any strings attached.
Oh, that's beautiful, Justin. Man, you got to excuse me, man. I would love for the audience to hear one more time these three levels of participating and joining in your ministry and its growth, so that that can be locked in and it can start to marinate in folks' minds, and then they can find a way to come alongside you. Can you mention those three ways? And then if you got a number, if you got a dream, something that God has either placed on your heart and then in the minds of your development team, name those for us, and then we're gonna send you off with a blessing, and pray that God brings you what you've asked.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, those three things. Obviously, the Forge partners,
Mhm.
um, which are our monthly recurring donors that keep our programs alive. Um, that is vital to us right now in this season. We are by end of year, just in our general part of the ministry, we're praying for 22,000 in monthly gifts to come in. So 22,000. So that adds up to $264,000 in a 12-year calendar year. So that would put us at a really healthy level to where our monthly support is balancing out what we spend every month. So that monthly support is really, really imperative for us to continue strong. And then as an organization, another 323,000 in frontline gifts. So our ultimate year-end goal for the end of 2024 by December 31st is 587,000. It's those two numbers together,
Mhm. Mhm.
the Forge and the Frontline. And so that's half of our year-end campaign. The other half of our year-end campaign is happening in all of our cities. Like
Mhm.
Terry has an amount that he's trying to raise to keep Twin Cities growing and
Mhm.
healthy. And so the ultimate year end with all of our cities raising their support is about $1.2 million.
Mhm.
And that's going to allow us to launch strong into 2025 and allow our first quarter to be off and
Mhm.
running. And then
Yeah.
in the springtime, we'll start talking about that next quarter. But
Mhm.
ultimately, that's going to set us off on, I mean, it's going to launch the rocket. I mean, we feel like we're
Mhm.
fueling
Mhm.
all these launch pads, and
Mhm.
that's going to launch the rocket for the new year. And then I told you about Nashville. Nashville is our
Yeah,
newest
yeah.
area. So that 100
Yep.
grand to get them off the ground is going to be a huge blessing too. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thanks for entertaining that, Justin. I just I've been in Christian higher ed ministry for quite a while, and what I didn't recognize is there's no mission without margin. And so, my friends,
Yeah.
as I learned more about what incredible mission and ministry movements are happening in all parts of the world, it takes resources, and I think I'm growing in a space. Thanks for uh, walking alongside me, and it's been because of folks like Eric that helped me understand. Like, Ron, God has no limit to the resources that are available to continue to help manifest the movement of bringing unity and reconciliation between our creator and the creation. So people to people, people to the planet, and people to our beloved Father. So Justin, thank you so much, man. It's been a gift to be able to hear from you and learn about likewise ministries. I got a burning question, and then I'm going to pass it to Eric so I can stop. Where did the name Likewise come from?
Oh, great question. Yeah, when I was younger, I was telling you about being discipled by my grandfather and writing songs with him. Well, he used to we used to spend a lot of time together when I was a teenager. And anytime I would leave his house, he would remind me of something that Jesus said. Before I would leave, he would say, Don't forget, Jesus said this. And then he said, now go and do likewise. And it was always this, he was the type of grandpa that he was had this radical faith because he was transformed like in a moment, because he was an alcoholic. His family was falling apart. His marriage was falling apart, and God got a hold of him, in an instant. And he just was like, I'm never going back there. And so he wanted to provide for his grandkids what he even didn't get to provide for his own kids. And so being able to have those moments of him challenging me to go and do likewise the way of Jesus, it just made me feel like, man, I want to carry that into the future, let it be part of his legacy. But in Hebrews 6, we're called to, Paul, or the writer in general, says, do as I do, be imitators of me, and then ultimately be imitators of Christ. And so it's a term that makes us feel like we're pushing people towards discipleship, and it's a movement. Go and do likewise what you've learned. Go and live it out. Don't just hold it to yourself. So
that's beautiful. Yeah, and I just want to conclude by saying thank you. Like, thank you for recognizing the need in your own life and with your wife, and continuing to walk out the journey in the church. I mean, it's significant, right? Because it's a tough call, and being on the front lines, and even as you were saying, being ahead of the front lines, choosing to step out ahead of the front lines and walk alongside people with no agenda other than to love worship leaders. It's desperately needed. And so thank you for the heart behind Likewise, and for taking the time to share with us today. And hopefully there's going to be some people listening that are stirred to come alongside and support. I was reminded as I was in Albania last week, it was interesting. Actually, it was just earlier this week. It's kind of, they're all blurring together. But I'm walking with a young man who chose to stay in Albania because of the call, and declined a job offer that was significant to work for free for the ministry that he was called to. And he was hesitant to ask for the things that he needed. And it's like, wait a minute, like God is a God of abundance. And I want to come alongside, and we just have so much opportunity. And I want to share his story, because there are people that are going to hear these podcasts and go, I want to build the church. So where I was going with that is, this young man was saying, well, because a lot of people get excited about building the church, and so I don't know if they're going to give to to meet my need. And I'm like, you, young man, are literally building the church in Albania, right? That's literally what you're doing. Like, you are equipping worship leaders and teaching them the gospel, and that's building the church. Investing in people is building the church. And so that's what's been going through my mind, is what Likewise is doing is investing in the people of the church, because it's not buildings. We all know that. We say that all the time, but we don't act like it very often, right? And so thank you for investing in the men and women who are serving on the front lines, who are bringing unity, who are needing to love their families just like they love the church family, and all of the things. And I just love your heart. I love the relationship I have with Terry. I love that literally 10 minutes from now, I'm going to head that way and spend some time with the Likewise community, being encouraged. My wife and I, what a blessing it is. And nice timing. We scheduled this when I didn't know that. So it all works out.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Thanks for what you're doing. I mean, gosh, you guys may not ever even see the impact that you're making just doing these podcasts, making people aware of what God's doing in these ministries. And I'll be praying for you, because I know you guys are in your own way at the front lines of a different type of scene, but same spiritual battle. And so I'll be praying for y'all as you continue to follow this calling that the Lord's put on your heart. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Pray that the Lord bless you and keep you, my friend.
Amen. Appreciate you guys.